Hi, this is Swan with Swan Amity Studios, and we are continuing our stitch out on the B-77 Bernette of all of our decorative stitches. We are into the section of our folders with 125. We're going to start here. We've dropped into our line that we have set up for our test, and we're starting off with a stitch that starts on the left-hand side. So we're watching our line as we begin to feed through, and we're just keeping everything nice and even. I'm going to pause and speed up our stitches. And you can see that the stitch is building really nicely. Now this is a stitch that backs over itself, giving us a couple of layers of thread in each section. So as we're building, we're just keeping everything moving nice and straight as the fabric moves back and forth through the machine. Now when a fabric moves back and forth like that, or from side to side in a machine, that's when you really need to watch your guideline, so that when we get to the end here, we can see that we've maintained a nice straight line all the way down because we were watching our guideline marking. Remember, we are using a washout guideline marking so that if we wanted to use that same kind of guideline on a piece that wasn't a test piece, we could always spray that with water and let that come right out. So we like how that one worked out. We'll go ahead and break thread there and come back to the top. And before we do, we're going to leave just a little marking at the top to indicate that this is stitch number 125. And stitch number 125 starts from the left, and this is a little D that indicates that this is the default, meaning I haven't altered the length or the width of the stitch at all. Now you can see how this one is, like we said during the video, building back and forth on itself. That's why the machine is going to move the fabric up and down for you as it builds. And I like how that gives me a nice thick stitching line. I can see how that would be really nice for a purse, maybe a little bag, or a nice edging along the side of a project. I'm going to move us over to stitch 126 and start from the top again. This one builds from side to side but starts the stitch from the middle. So let's see how that works out for it. We're going to needle down and get started. Now this one is going to build from one side to the other, working on the left and then working on the right. And so I'm mostly going to start watching. I already noticed that it shifted my fabric a little bit as it was going. So now I'm going to start watching to make sure that my guideline stays more right in the middle of my foot. Remembering that we're always kind of watching for what is it we need to give our attention to in order to keep our stitches looking nice and straight and moving through the machine neatly. This is one that when we build from side to side like this, I find that I get distracted a little bit. So I really have to pay attention to making sure that that guideline stays in the center of the foot. Otherwise, I will end up with a curved line of stitching or kind of a jagged line of stitching. This one is also building by giving me a thicker line of stitching. I like these kind of little X's and O's, and I think they look, or I'm sorry, these are just X's and O's. There's our reflex statement. So just the X's, of course, but I feel like they look like a little bit of cross stitching. So when I'm looking at something like this one, I think about some of the maybe cutesy pie little things this could go on. Maybe this is great for building out the collar on a dress, or adding a little something to an apron string that might be really cute. I like how that one functions. Looks like I would need to mess around just a little bit with the tension to get that one to look absolutely perfect, but I'm not unhappy with that at all. Let's go ahead and move to stitch 127. And we're going to go ahead and drop our presser foot back down. I'm noticing that stitch 127, very similar to 126, and also starts from the center. And because I know that it's going to build similarly to 126, this time I'm going to watch that guideline really closely because I noticed this one did not turn out straight. So let's see if we can clean that up. I'm just going to watch my guideline now and make sure it's feeding right into the center of the foot. As we've said with some of our previous videos on using your decorative stitches, you're going to be careful to not let your hand do much more than behave as a guide. No pulling through the machine and no counteracting the machine as it drags the fabric through with the feed dogs. We just want to keep everything nice and even as it's moving. Now here I'm applying a little bit of pressure with my hand. Unlike normally, I would just let it go right beneath my fingers and I wouldn't be holding on at all. But anytime that the stitch starts to pull the fabric from one side or the other, then I need to keep just a light pressure on the fabric, making sure that I'm not holding it back from feeding through the machine evenly. Now I like how 127 is building out here. It feels like it's just a slightly smaller version of 126. And let's take a peek at the completed outcome there. We're just going to break thread and come through. And yes, we're getting 2 little X's on each side instead of 3 little X's. Once again, I think that's really cute. And I kind of prefer this one versus this one, but you might have your favorite. Let's go ahead and remember to mark those. We're going to indicate that that is number 126. Starts from the middle. Now you might like M or you might like C for center, totally up to you, and D for default. We're going to do the same thing over here. 127, middle for where the stitch begins, and default because we have not changed the size of the stitch. So let's go ahead and say these look fabulous. I even kind of like them in that blue thread. Makes me think about using that again. And we're going to move on to our next set of stitches in our next video. Thank you for joining me, and remember to always stitch happy.